4. Because I didn't have any gym shoes, I wasn't allowed to take part in the class. I had to sit on the bleachers at the end of the gym. Mr. Jarris ignored me, which was nice. The other kids all had to climb ropes. They had to shimmy up these big fat ropes that hung down from the ceiling. They had to climb up about 20 feet and then come down without sliding and get rope burns on their legs. Some of them slid down too fast and got big red marks on the insides of their thighs. I decided to leave my brand new gym shoes at home in my closet for as long as possible. For a few days, Mr. Jarris would ask me where my gym shoes were. I would look at the floor and sort of shake my head and look like I was really sad that I had forgotten my gym shoes. After a while, Mr. Jarris decided that I was stupid or feeble-minded or something, and he quit asking me. When I came into the gym class, he would just nod in the direction of the bleachers, and I would climb up and sit down for the rest of the class. It was that way in all my classes. I found out if I acted dumb, pretty soon the teachers would leave me alone. I left all my books and stuff in my locker. When a teacher would ask me where my books were, I said I didn't know. Then they'd get me a new book, and I'd leave that one in the locker too. After a while, they just left me alone. After a couple of weeks of school, all I had to do was walk from class to class with nothing in my hands. The only trouble was, it was boring. If I brought something to read, the teachers might have caught on that I wasn't really stupid. All I had to do was sit and think and watch the other kids. I got to know a lot about them. I used to wonder what it would happen if to a kid who really was dumb as I was pretending to be. Nobody would help him, and he would just sit there like I was doing. The kids ignored me, or maybe giggled at me. The teachers ignored me, or just sort of smiled sweetly as if to say, "Leonard, you just sit still and not make any noise and not take up any of my valuable time, and everything will be just fine." Aln Mndlshn was really a lousy school, even if most of the kids were rich and neat and unwrinkled and tall and didn't wear glasses. There were a few kids who weren't really in much better shape than I was, like the small one whose name was Henry Bagel. Those kids got ignored and giggled at, and the teachers sort of overlooked them because they didn't look like Aln Mndlshn students. I mean, they were messy or freakish or smelly or twitchy. I thought at first that they would be willing to be friends with me if nobody else was looking, but they all wanted to be regular Aln Mndlshn kids. They didn't want to be seen with me or any of the other weirdos, and they kept on trying to be accepted by the real kids. I used to watch them in the lunch court. Each freak had picked out a little group to hang out with, and he would keep trailing after them and laughing at their jokes, and every once in a while he'd shout out something funny he'd been planning to say all week. Sometimes the older kids would stop ignoring Henry Bagel long enough to insult him or make fun of him, and I swear, Henry Bagel looked as though he liked it. The strange thing was that Henry Bagel and the other weird kids all hated me. The real kids didn't pay any attention to me, but the freaky kids that everyone played jokes on and punched around really hated me. I think it was because I was the only thing lower than they were. I used to spend time trying to pick the ones who would be the lowest person in the school if I dropped dead. After my boring day in school, I would take all my books home and read them. I'm a good reader. Since the first grade, when I bought a Batman comic and managed to read the whole thing, every word, I wanted to read it all because it was my book. I had paid for it. Also, it was a lot more interesting than those dumb readers they gave me. Once I smashed my way through that Batman, I wasn't afraid to read anything, so I read whatever I wanted. It only took me a couple of weeks to read all my textbooks. My social studies book I read in one night. In school, the kids had to read a chapter a week, or the teacher would say, "Tonight, read pages 93 through 97 inclusive," and all the kids would go, "Ah," as though they had just been asked to crawl 10 miles on their hands and knees. Then the next day, the teacher would spend 45 minutes trying to get the kids to explain what they had read. They could hardly do it. Almost all of them had a reading problem, and those that didn't hated reading because the other kids did. Mostly what the teacher did was try to get some clue that the kids had read what they were supposed to, and that they had understood it. "Who can tell me the name for the holy wars that the knights in the Middle Ages went to fight?" The teacher would ask. No hands. "Anybody?" Finally a hand. Then the teacher would sort of move her lips silently, saying along with the kids, "Crusades?" Actually, I found that medieval stuff really interesting, and took out a lot of books about it from the public library. There was this cool good movie with Tony Curtis on TV, and then it turned out that it had been taken from a book, Men of Iron, which was even better. I found a lot of good stuff about knights and jousting and crusades and all that. It was pretty exciting, but not to the kids at Bat Masterson. To them, having to pick their way through pages 93 to 97 inclusive, ah. The only class I went to where the kids enjoyed themselves, or admitted they were enjoying themselves, was Mr. Jarris's gym class. They sure loved to climb those ropes. Mr. Jarris told them one time that anybody who got an A in gym would be able to pass basic training in the Marine Corps. After that, they went on those ropes like madmen. I guess they all wanted to be Marines. My parents are sort of dumb. I mean, I love them and all that, but they weren't very interesting. They're only interested in getting things for the house and barbecuing, and that sort of thing. You can't talk to them the way you can talk to my grandparents. We go over there every week or so, and it was my only chance to enjoy some conversation. Also, I could go outside and meet up with the kids in the old neighborhood. It wasn't the same as if I had been going to school with them every day, but we could still hack around and tell jokes and throw a ball around. My former best friend, Charlie Nastrowski, had a new best friend, Billy O'Brien, who had been my second best friend, which was only reasonable, because I wasn't there every day anymore. But it wasn't quite the same as it had been before we moved. I mean, they had special jokes about teachers I'd never seen, and that sort of thing. Still, it was nice to be with people who liked me.